Thanks for staying with us. Social media has been abuzz with issues around the rolling blackouts, Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, Pongola crash, among others. Former Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize also making an appearance on the trends there. Let's unpack these social media trends with founder, chief executive of Decode, Lerato Tshenkeng, who joins us in studio. Thank you so much for your time. Never a dull moment on social media, and one can expect, of course, that the rolling blackouts will be trending for quite some time. What are they saying?
No, absolutely, Bongo, and good evening to the viewers today. So, when stage 6 started happening, of course, a lot of people were quite angry. But the biggest issue was really around businesses, right? In fact, we know now it's wedding season, and this weekend is called Inkulule weekend, and people are expecting to be, in their garbs, traditional garbs, and the likes at weddings, and a lot of people who are then, either seamstresses or who create a lot of these beautiful creations, they don't have, alternative energy, whether it's solar generators and the likes. So it then means that they have, backed up orders and the likes. But of course, the press briefing by the CEO and the chief operations officer was one that really made the news, and precisely because people were asking, so how do you expect us to watch this press briefing when we know the levels of or at least that we don't have electricity.
At the same time, though, Lerato, you talk about something important. I mean, imagine at a wedding, it's a weekend, and some are going to probably be getting married in the township, and then there's load shedding right in the middle of the speeches.
Absolutely. In fact, I worry for everyone who's hosting a wedding this weekend because, people are reporting at least around between 5 to 6 hours in terms of, how long load shedding lasts. So it therefore means that people need to have generators as backup for music. And generally, when you're at weddings, you need music. Of course, people, use the parlor and the likes to make the entertainment, but you also need a little bit of, that element. But also, importantly, when you have other events, you need electricity. When you have, and that's what I was saying, the biggest issue has been, although there's been a lot of jokes or running commentary with people making jokes about electricity, the biggest issue has been the impact on small businesses who don't have the wherewithal to at least buy generators or any other kind of backup electricity.
As if that's not enough, then enter an interest rate hike.
Yeah.
That also, yeah. It made things very difficult for a lot of people. And some even last night saying to us on the show that, what more do you want us to do in terms of tightening the belt now? Yeah.
No, and Bongi, I think that the biggest challenge is South Africans have been complaining about the rising cost of living, rising cost of everything, right? SAFTU and COSATU just recently had what was termed a national shutdown precisely for the rising cost of living. And we know that, there are a number of people who borrow, many of them borrow from, unsecured lenders. And what therefore means is that the cost of borrowing becomes a lot more. And it begs the question, while you understand that, there's in their wisdom, the Reserve Bank may know why they believe that it ought to be, at least they ought to increase the interest rate. It then begs the question, what about the people who are going to really suffer from this? Because it's not just, people, even if you don't have a bond or have money that you've borrowed. The biggest challenge is if I am a small business owner and my interest increases, I'm going to pass on the cost to you as the consumer. So the consumers are always going to feel the pinch either way.
At the same time, we talk about this, and then we hear even from former President Thabo Mbeki talking about, what he terms a leadership deficit, at Eskom and all of that. But did the users take it back to 2008 at some point where he also had to apologize?
No, absolutely. And I guess, President Thabo Mbeki, like many leaders, he has a very colored and textured legacy. And one of those is that, his leadership at the time knew that, that there was, a report that required for them to invest in energy security, and they did not. They had to apologize. And that will always come back to bite him. Similar with the HIV/AIDS, how he dealt with the matter. So that was always going to come up, and they raised it sharply. But I think one of the things that we must do is that to two things can be true at the same time, right? It is true that President Thabo Mbeki's leadership, they neglected their responsibility and duty, but it is also true what they are raising around the current ESCOM leadership in terms of its inability and not being capable of doing the things that ought to be, making or taking our country further.
And, the story was one of those that was quite heartbreaking, the crash, the Pongola crash, looking at the fact that these are babies, if one even has to put it that way, the ages of 5 and 12. And that story crushed quite a lot of people. Absolutely heartbreaking.
But I think what is most heartbreaking is when you have a Minister of Transport who, and I guess his trip to the UAE had always been, something that was on his calendar. But he thought that it was okay for him to tweet that I've just landed, and it begs the question, where is the empathy? Right, and so it shows again to what President Thabo Mbeki was raising around, the lack of leadership that is empathetic, that is compassionate. Because in this case, one, there's a tweet that was raising that I had actually raised this thing with the minister on Twitter in particular, but clearly they listen to other celebrities who have a bigger following, and we've actually seen that some of these leaders on social media, they only engage with those that they believe that they have a social profile, some social capital, and it demonstrates to the point that I've always been raising, that as long as we have our leaders who are on social media who do not believe that they ought to be using it for social good, for connecting with citizens, we'll have things like this. Because there are many people who report these things like this. This issue had been reported for the longest time. So it was just a matter of time that this was going to happen this way. And of course, condolences to the families as they've lost their people.
Were they calling on him to probably do what the president did, change his travel plans, despite the fact that this trip had been probably on his calendar, as you say, and go to the residents and not do it days later, but simply change the course and come back and go and really speak to them? Because ultimately it's a huge loss, this one. It's not something that should be swept under the carpet and just move on from it.
Absolutely. So the biggest call, and again, Minister Fikile Mbalula has an interesting relationship with the people on social media, particularly on Twitter, right? Precisely because of his own conduct, right? And whenever he puts up something, whether it's official or not, people always remind him of the things that he has done wrong, whether it's, this thing of tinkering with potholes and the likes. So there was not even an expectation that he would do anything different. But of course, in his lack of leadership style, he then went on table in the middle of the road, press briefing, and you realize that this is somebody who's completely out of touch. So he sees every moment as a PR gimmick moment, and unfortunately, that people on Twitter and on social media are not kind to him. I think he has it coming.
Let's talk then, finally about the developments around the leadership race of the ANC. It's I wouldn't even say taking shape, because there's quite a lot happening in the public domain, the statements here and endorsements there and all of that. But we saw Zweli Mkhize also trending at some point, and then we also saw Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma also trending, and Dr. Zweli Mkhize, of course, trending even for that particular briefing that he would have held about, not a briefing, an address about a week and a half ago. So there's quite a lot of talk that is coming into play about this one.
Yeah. This was always going to be very interesting, right? And we remember how, Dr. Zweli Mkhize left the public scene because of the digital vibes. And of course, we all had to observe whether he was going to mount a fight back so that, he restores his credibility, but also for his ambitions. It has always been clear that he had the ambitions of becoming ANC's #1 and hopefully South Africa's #1. And for the reasons that he had the opportunity to leave early, I suspect he had been emasebeni for the longest time, been able to mobilize and at least get them to be on his side. So it is not surprising that out of the 11 regions in KwaZulu-Natal, almost all of them unanimously are backing him instead of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Of course, we're expecting that the least that could have happened is that the Ikropo region would have endorsed Dr. Nkosazana Zuma because it's her region, but it did not happen that way. But also it may, again, just be a matter of as the lobbying happens now, it is going to morph and take different shapes. We remember, the last days in Nazareth in 2017. We know that there may have been money that exchanged hands and swayed the decisions and the likes. So we are far from over. This is literally just the beginning of the journey. As
you talk about Amandla Semasebeni there, I mean, you think about what KwaZulu-Natal did as well, to say go and talk about it to the branches, and a lot of people saying that just that alone was an interesting PR move. That was seen by some on social media as them saying, we either do not want to be embarrassed possibly by, people saying something different at branch level, or also at the same time, others are saying it's democracy in action.
No, and I think it is good by the KZN leadership in terms of, recognizing that, for instance, there are a number of provincial executive committees, like Limpopo in particular. They have been the ones that have literally expressed their favor for President Cyril Ramaphosa. And it is now interesting to say, so if we say Amandla Semasebeni, what does it mean? Does it mean that they've literally consulted all the branches and there's a unanimous agreement that, they should endorse? Or it's just a desire from the PEC itself as the leadership? And I guess it was a good PR exercise from the KZN leadership. And I think, they've been doing relatively well so far in terms of how they communicate, even from the Secretariat's office, and how they even communicate in the issue of, that there are two different candidates that may be preferred for the Secretary General in Phumulo Masaule and even Mtolo as well.
All right, let's see then what the next trends are looking like on social media, because there's never a dull day there. There's always something trending that is interesting, and other times you don't even know what it's about sometimes. So thank you so much for trying to make sense, in fact, helping us to decode some of these particular trends. That is Lerato Tshenkeng, who's the founder, chief executive of Decode.